Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 14 of my RollerCoaster Tycoon build series. In this one, we're going to be going through Mothball Mountain, which is an incredibly hard scenario. Well, I wouldn't say incredibly hard, but out of the original scenario set, I think it's probably the hardest, especially given my style of building, and it's widely considered to be one of the hardest, and and for how I want to go about building parks in this, everything about this scenario is absolutely evil. It rains all the time, like you can see within the first few minutes there, it was raining, and a big lake in the middle. You get no area to build. The terrain is unfriendly. There's tons of trees everywhere. The land costs $90 per tile to build. It's just problem after problem after problem with this park. And to top it off with the way that I wanted to build the park, I didn't really want to have any big coasters or anything at the front. And before I really wanted to go about laying everything out, I wanted to have everything sort of unlocked. So I was in this conundrum where I needed to make money, but all of the big money makers were kind of like paywalled off, until I could expand the park further and sort of lay out what I needed without having to sort of redo a bunch of things. So this whole map was a total slog for me. And in addition to that, you get nothing for theming. It pretty much leads you to, sort of theme in a Millennium Mines version 2, which I didn't want to do. And so I just let this map sort of sit for a month. I had no idea what I wanted to do with this map. It was... I went and played other stuff basically, recorded some other things, which, at some point in the future, we'll get around to it. Maybe we'll get around to actually releasing my Planet Coaster videos one day. But, I just let it sit and I had no ideas for it, because I didn't want to do a Millennium Mines again. And, I didn't want to do a generic forest, log cabin type thing. I needed it to be a little bit more special, and oh man, is this map ever evil. So it kind of occurred to me that maybe I was looking in the wrong direction for a theme. Maybe what I should be going with is more of a feeling. How did this map make me feel? And this map made me feel annoyed and like the map was evil. And so I decided to go with an evil theme. And the evil theme I chose is something called Bohemian Grove. And if you don't know what Bohemian Grove is, well, boy, are you in for a time today. It's basically this place in California, kind of a mountainous forest region with a nice lake in the middle, perfect for what we're trying to build here. It's sort of where, all the top echelon type people go. They go there once a year in midsummer, and they have tea and they talk and they cremate their cares and that type of thing. Normal guy stuff, type of thing every family does. So I figured, why not make a theme park out of it, because that'd be a good idea. So here we are. That's what we're doing. And it kind of fits because, Mothball Mountain is also Mystic Mountain in the original game, or the UK version of the game. And it said that Bohemian Grove is kind of mystical, but, in an evil way. So I thought that would be perfect. And it's deep in the forest, it has a lake, it's basically just log cabins as far as what anyone really knows about it, which is perfect for our theming choices here and the setting. And, aside from that, okay, so what makes it different than just a lake with some log cabins? Well, they have this, owl, and they named it Molok, like from the Bible, right? Totally normal. That's what everyone does. It's a big 40-foot stone owl, and they have it right on the shoreline of the lake. And so I was like, oh, well, there you go. We got a nice lake. We have a perfect view of the shoreline. And so that's it. That's the theme. We'll put the owl at some point here. Right? Yeah. So that's what we're going for in this one. We're going for Bohemian Grove, but it's Mystic Mountain. Mystic Mountain is Bohemian Grove, and as far as I know, maybe that's what Chris Sawyer was secretly basing it on, given how evil this map is. So, to begin with what I started here, like I said, I wanted to keep sort of the back section for the larger rides. And so, for the completion of the actual scenario objectives, I decided to keep my building mostly on the north shore, near the entrance, and I pretty much stay there for the majority of the scenario up until I complete the scenario. I now had decided to start construction on Molok over here and sort of the infrastructure that would be around him. So we got that going. We've got our path system, which I wanted to go all the way around the lake. Here we are, we're building Molok. Now, of course, building an owl out of land in RCT is not simple. I don't know. Like, it kind of looks like an owl to me. I put some wood for ears on top just to give it, a bit more ear, and I tried to give it some texture with some walls and stuff, but there's really only so much I could do. But that's it. There you go. There's Molok. And if you're wondering what it looks in real life, it looks something like this. Mine sort of looks like a fat teddy bear in comparison, but that's what you get with RollerCoaster Tycoon Land, and how much effort I was willing to put into that. So I started then sort of buying out the land, as I wanted to have a significant portion of the land bought out before I really started building there. So I figured starting early would be the best strategy, and I just sort of buy the land out small chunks at a time when I had a little bit of extra money. My main strategy for making money in this level, given that I did not have any serious money making rides, was to basically pump a bunch of ads, bring in a bunch of people. I switched to a purely park entrance fee based park pretty early on, so you don't even see it happen in this particular cut of the playthrough, as I didn't really think it was that important, as I pretty much ran the entire scenario on entrance fee only. And yeah, so basically I just run a bunch of ads. The other downside of this scenario is that given that there is so much rain, your umbrellas just don't have the significant kick to the finances that they do in other scenarios, because it rains so often that pretty much everybody always has a umbrella already, and so the hit to the rides really is significant. And in addition to that, I had issues with making money, as I wanted to max out my research and get as much rides as possible. So I had pretty much everything working against me in this scenario to try and make a nice scenario, aside from artificial limitations like the stuff that Rainbow Valley has and things like that. But I slogged through it. It did take me quite a while. I apologize for the length in time between releasing roller coaster videos, as I have had some life events happen and things like that have taken away a significant amount of time. There we go, done the scenario, and now the real building can begin, and we got Molok in the background there, ready to go. So that's good. So yeah, I have had some life events happen that have taken time away, and producing these style of videos is fairly intensive compared to other styles of videos I'm finding, but I like doing it this way. It's more fun. So there is that. So now that I had finished the scenario and getting the positive company value on the scoreboard wasn't my main concern, I started to really build out the infrastructure, start enhancing the theming in the front area. I wanted to sort of, you know, base everything off of kind of how I styled the initial area, which I'm not going for the layout of Bohemian Grove here, by the way. I was just going for sort of like the inspiration, we'll call it the RCT universe of Bohemian Grove, which is, I don't know, nothing like it, and a lot happier, I would guess. But, you know, I wanted to try to fit all three of the transport rides into this particular scenario, which I thought would be an interesting additional challenge, as if I needed an additional challenge for this one. But I wanted to get a train and a monorail and a chairlift in here. And what I kind of figured they would be is like stacked as you go up the mountain. Unfortunately, the mountain goes a lot higher than I had anticipated, and some of the things I had planned for this particular map didn't work out quite the way I had hoped. As I really thought that I had maybe 10 more units or so of height, but the map in this particular one is like at the baseline is quite high. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but I couldn't go as high as I usually can with maps, especially at the top of the mountain, which was where I wanted to have like sort of this like suspended tree fort city thing. I thought it would be cool if you had like sort of suspended pathways going between like long or like large tree looking structures, you know, sort of picture if you've ever played Myst. There's Channelwood. Channelwood is one of the ages that you visit, and yeah, that was kind of like the what I envisioned. But unfortunately, the height limitation just didn't allow for it, and I had to stick with pretty low structures all throughout. And I didn't want to build anything too like substantive either, because going with the Bohemian Grove theme, what I wanted was like cabins, and it should be pretty low scale. So an interesting change that I did do, as opposed to something like Millennium Mines, however, was I decided that all of the coasters in this would be metallic instead of wooden. So in Millennium Mines, I went for like almost purely wooden coasters, or if not wooden, none of them had inversions or anything like that, and I wanted to stick with that sort of classic mine feel. On this one, I did not want the mine feel, although I do use some of the mine scenery. But I really wanted to stay away from creating another Millennium Mines, or really creating anything that I had created before, given the limitations, because oh man, there's like so many. It's so easy just to build, lakeside forest mine, right? Which is basically what I did, but we've got Molok. Molok the owl, come on, yeah. Molok. Alright, so I figured I would finish off basically the front of this one before moving on to the back, as I really needed to save up money, and a lot of this I'm not sure if it's going to work in the time lapse, or at least like it'll work, but it might show like kind of interesting, because basically throughout the whole middle of the scenario, I didn't build much, and I was just buying land, but I was buying land in tiny parcels, and then like large periods of time would pass in between buying the tiny parcels of land, because I would have to basically do like another ad cycle, pump and dump a whole bunch of customers, and basically do that whole thing before I had enough surplus that I could do another purchase of land. But given that I cut out all of the middle stuff there, and I only have the land purchases in this time lapse, it might actually end up looking like I just sort of like bought all of it in quick succession. But if you watch the money, pretty much throughout this entire playthrough, I was money poor. I spent everything I got up until the very end, when I finally basically stopped building infrastructure, stopped building rides, focused purely on scenery, and at that point finally, I started to make money up until the point of the outro, where I have around 10,000 or so. Ooh, which is it's a big departure from the past scenarios, given that, those scenarios, by the time that I had done the outro, I was just rolling in cash, up to, I think Millennium Mines, I had over 100,000, like, by the time I did the outro there. It probably looks like I cheated, but I would never cheat. It's a promise I make to you, dear viewer. I will never cheat on the altar of Molok. I swear. Yeah, so here we go. Yeah, another segment. So basically I would do it in like little segments like that. I'd save up about, yeah, there we go. So each one of those was like a little segment. Each time that, like, I sort of closed the tool and opened the tool, significant amount of time passed between all of those, relatively speaking. It's interesting that this scenario is in terms of gameplay, it's one of the longest scenarios. Like, I think it's only beaten by a couple others that, approach the year 30 mark. But in terms of actual, like, building time, like the actual runtime of the video, it's actually a lot shorter than I was expecting, given the amount of footage that I had recorded. But yeah, a lot of it was just sitting and waiting for the money to sort of roll in and roll over so I could do more land and build a little bit more. Here we go. I finally got enough land that I felt like I could build my first coaster, which was going to be a steel mini coaster. Now, I decided I would name all of the coasters in this after Bohemian Grove-ish type things, and so I ended up calling this one Molok's Revenge. Now, not everything I named after Molok. I threw some other sort of references in there too, but this one was called Molok's Revenge, and it's pretty good. I like it. It's mostly based on helixes. I thought that it would work well. It gains a fair amount of speed. I would call it like an intermediate ride, maybe. Not necessarily a junior ride, as the coaster type would imply, as the first initial part there is fairly intense, but not like too intense. It's still, I think it was still in the mediums or something on the intensity side, and with some, when I was done with the scenery and stuff, the excitement had gone into the highs. But not a bad little coaster. I liked wrapping it around the observation tower there, and later in I bring the launch free fall in another section of it, so I have both sort of tower rides sitting in between it, which I thought was a neat effect. Lots of bridges in this particular map. You probably noticed, especially the high bridge. I'll point it out when we get back to it. I've been kind of distracted talking about the overarching theme of the map, but yeah, I did want to have like a fair amount of bridges, but not too many paths. I did want to keep that sort of out in the wilderness feel. Again, along with not too much infrastructure, but enough infrastructure that it was interesting, and I could resolve some of the sort of terrain issues in a way that I felt was satisfactory. Because I've never been a big fan of just sort of like flattening the terrain, right? Like, oh, I need a ride here, I'm just gonna flatten all the terrain. I find that sort of looks boring, and so what I enjoy doing more, in this case I did it, but it was for a food court, but I find that like adapting the area with buildings and stuff so that your pathways are not as awkward, really helps sort of bring an area together, as opposed to flattening it out so that you can sort of do it the more basic way. Of course, it's a lot more expensive that way, but I do find that it sort of gives areas a lot more character than if they're just left flat. And of course, you can just have crazy winding pathways everywhere that are, I find, unwieldy too. Having pathways with supports without like, destinations and stuff like that. In some cases, in small cases, I do like it, but most times I like to sort of give some structure to my bridges and pathways, and otherwise have them on ground, unless absolutely necessary. So about 25% of the train goes underground, as I had to do that just to resolve the issue. But I think overall the train's pretty cool. I really do like it. I like that it, circles Molok there. I do think that the front of the park ends up being the best looking part of the park, just due to the variety with the lake and how dense it was. Like, I do keep up the density in terms of the scenery and things, but just given that the area behind is so mountainous, it didn't make sense to bring everything together like it would be around the lake area. And so I just kept going with the, sort of mountainous cabin-like theme, and tried to space out the buildings in the back so that it didn't look too sparse in any particular area, but no particular area looked to be too crowded. Except for, I do have sort of a nice centralized segment of buildings with sort of an interesting plaza in the middle and stuff, though we haven't got there. But aside from that, it is pretty sparse. I thought it would be neat if the train had sort of a few buildings and things right here that it could kind of go right side by side and have some interaction with, right along with the pond down below, and then the coaster up above, and the observation tower. Really trying to just stack as many interactions as I could there. I think it that's one of my favorite just parts of the park right there, is where that train goes through that little building and right near the pond. I'm pretty happy with that one. I think it looks really good. I tried to keep the train down in the valley and down on the ground, and but to still give some opportunity to have things go under it. Like, you can see there's that path there that goes under it right before it heads into the hill in the mountain, or the hill in the mountain. There's a hill in that mountain. No, there's a tunnel in the hill. There's no mountain. It's just a hill with a tunnel. The tunnel is in the hill. But so the train ends up being sort of the low level transport ride. The monorail ends up being sort of the mid-level one, and about half of the monorail ends up underground as a result of that. In fact, I had to put an entire station underground, which I wasn't super happy with, but I think it kind of works. And it sits underneath a building, so the entrance to it isn't entirely underground. You can still see the queues and stuff. Oh, here we go. This is one of my favorite rides in the park as well, which is what I did with the river rapids here. A lot of it goes underground. I changed this. I ended up going the other direction. I later decided I didn't want it going all the way up that hill, because the main thing that I wanted was for it to go sort of underneath the path and create sort of a little river there. And I thought that would be super cool if it went down the hill, under the path, into the hill, and then sort of came out in the lake, and then went around, and then went back up to the station, right? So sort of an anticlimactic ride in that way, in that all of the excitement happens at the beginning, and then literally the end of the ride is pretty much you just climbing uphill underground, which I imagine could have been made a little bit interesting. If you had some sort of underground scenery or something. I did put a little hill with a rapids at the very end, just so that you're not just climbing directly into the station, and you do have one descent there down into that little sort of pond area, and it reconnects to the station. And I did make that pond bigger too, so that it sort of envelops and that whole thing sits underwater. But yeah, I really like this river rapid, especially when I'm done with it, with the scenery and everything. This area was a real challenge, given that I was digging so far into the hill. As I mentioned earlier, I really hate having to like flatten. But I felt that in this case, it would work. And so this is also going to be an example of how I use buildings to sort of resolve terrain problems such as this. As the flat surface, I'm going to actually turn into a building there, to sort of give an entrance to the underground and things like that. And the literally the only reason that this building really needs to exist, it does end up working as a station as well, at the higher level. But really, I probably wouldn't have put this building here had it not been for the fact that I had dug so deeply into that mountain. It really necessitated the need. I'm not talking about this building here that I'm building, but it's going to be the one next to it, sort of at the end of that double path area, the plaza. I end up putting another building there, sort of like a big fort building. I think it's the biggest building, maybe. But I really like the building that I did there for the River Rapids station, though. I think that one worked out pretty good, too. And then sitting along the bridge, which goes over the River Rapids, and then through that sort of house, and then connects to the other side of the lake. Yeah, I really, alongside Molok, got to have a good view of Molok there. And so I really wanted the train to be able to see Molok, and I wanted the people on the bridge to see Molok. You can walk behind Molok. You can see Molok from the train across the lake. You can see Molok from the paths across the lake from multiple heights, because I had to do some multi-level pathing there to get the loops. And yeah, you know. As far as like the front of the park goes, I think it's probably, one of the better looking entrances. I can just imagine what it probably looks like from ground level. And if I ever do like those, I know that there are recreated scenarios of RCT1 and RCT2 in the RCT3 engine that you can get and do. And maybe if I ever do Mothball Mountain in RCT3, I will try to recreate what I've done here as closely as possible, so that we could get the ground view angle of what this all looked like. Of course, I try and do a better job on Molok and not use wood for ears. So there we've got the river rapids going down and into the lake. Buy some more land. It took forever to buy the land. In fact, putting this park together, once I had all of the land, really didn't take that long. I was surprised editing the footage at just how many hours of just waiting, buying land, doing a little bit of scenery here and there, but mostly just waiting and buying land, to get enough space to build sort of the next ride that I had been intending. Or to, if not to build the next ride, also to build out some of the landmarks and positioning items that I would need to be able to scale things properly, make sure things will line up and that type of thing. Buy some more land. I tried not to make very much of the path around the lake area straight. I really wanted to do a bit more of that sort of zigzaggedy path. I like the idea of having the bridges, though, sort of over the crevices near the edge. So I kept those instead of bringing the land up and continuing the whole, sort of structured area that I had going there. Now that I had the one roller coaster, the whole finance issue really started to uh, improve a little bit. It was a lot easier to get more guests into the park. Of course, I was really packing them into the park in terms of ads and stuff. At certain points, I would just have people everywhere. You can see how crowded it is, even here at like the rear plaza. I mean, yeah, there's the river rapids there and stuff. You can see the big climb up the hill inside there. So here we go. I'm building the building that I was talking about. So yeah, this building that I'm building here basically only exists because I needed some sort of solution to deal with this hill face that I had dug into, because I didn't want to flatten the whole area. I wanted to keep a lot of this hill, and if I went any further, it would just cause more and more problems. So what I decided to do is turn the whole thing into a building, basically, and this would give me access and a proper entrance and useful utilities, basically, for a few things, including the monorail and a path to loop around to the other side of the map, as well as a entrance building for the chairlift, which was going to be the third transport ride that I implemented. And this would basically just go from sort of the mid, I guess that's the west, yeah, so like the west of the park to sort of the southeast of the park. It would go near which happened to be like on top of the monorail station, like the south monorail station, basically, except you would have to go down and around and then underground. Even though it was like technically in the building, the paths inside weren't connected. You actually had to go down to the lower level. But we'll talk about that when we get there. This is probably my second favorite area. It's hard to pick, honestly, between the two. The River Rapids entrance area with the building and the hill and the bridge and things is a really nice area too, along with that train one I had mentioned earlier. Buy some more land. Buy some more land. We'll just keep going on the land. It did help in the sense that, whenever I didn't know what to do, there was always something else to do in this map, because you just don't have the money to do everything that you want to do at the same time. And so, it'd be like, okay, I've kind of run out of scenery ideas or whatever for the moment. Let's go to buying land, and save up and buy some land and sort of think about scenery and watch the park do its stuff, right? Here we're building the top spin now. I wanted to have sort of like a meandering path down into it that would go sort of around. I wanted to give this whole area sort of to the top spin, or the gravitron as it's called in this version of the game. So I figured I would put the entrance and exit there. Give it a nice view of the lake with the river rapids down below. The other thing about this particular map is that the terrain differentials are really jarring. Like, if you're not careful, you can end up with like rides sort of towering over other rides and really affecting the visibility. So I tried to map out where things would be in ways that, everything was clearly visible in some sense. Like everything had their own view. There was sort of like a scenic viewpoint that would focus on each particular ride, and nothing was like terribly occluded except maybe things like the spiral slide or something like that, you know. Um, so instead of like continuing with flattening more, I figured I would just sort of decorate that hill that separated the path and the building, throw some fences around to make it sort of look like it was stabilized in some way, so you're not going to get some sort of like rock slide down the hill or something. And then went back to theming in the top spin area. Figured I'd throw one more balloon in there. I had the red balloons, which I don't know why I picked red for this particular map. I don't know. I sort of like associated it with it, I guess. It and the red balloons and how evil it is, and or Pennywise rather, you know. So that was sort of why I went with red highlighting in this particular map, was to really accent the evilness of the map. This building was sort of just a I don't know, I guess you could call it an improvisation. I wasn't sure. I went into this building with no plan whatsoever. I just knew that I needed to do something with this terrain. You could probably say that this building is also, like, the end design of this building is really just there to separate between the hill and the building itself, without having to like separate the terrain and bring the hill down. In particular, because I actually would have preferred in this case to bring the hill down, because I do find that this building is a little too big, and just a little sort of not right. But I didn't want to do another big wooden building, and bringing the hill down wouldn't have worked because a large portion of that hill sits outside of the borders. And so I figured that, given that it is the edge of the map, some sort of large industrialer looking, like maybe it's the generator building or something. Who knows? Buy some more land here. Yeah, you really do end up going up quite high in this map, which makes it really, it does make it challenging to sort of lay things out in a way that is conducive to something that doesn't look like spaghetti. At this point in the game, it's kind of funny because if you look on YouTube, there's tons of Forest Frontiers, right? Everybody's played Forest Frontiers, and by the time that you get to like Mothball Mountain, there's a lot less playthroughs for Mothball Mountain than there is for Forest Frontiers. I'll put it that way. And I think that at a certain point, some of the challenges in the game really become unfun. Unless you're looking to be challenged, sort of like what I'm doing here. But, when you're trying to build a theme park, why would you ever pick this place to build a theme park? Like, it makes no sense, from a terrain-wise perspective. And so, from that point of view, I think it does make it a little unfun. And I can see why, like, the early scenarios get so much play, and the later ones really don't. And I think it's mostly because like the later ones really are about completing that scenario objective, right? As you go into the more challenging and expert parks, the ability to be creative goes significantly down. Like you compare it to building on something like Evergreen Art Gardens or Forest Frontiers or whatever. Everybody's favorite is Forest Frontiers because it's just a nice, large, open, flat area. You don't have to do anything with the land. It's perfect, right? It's exactly where you would want to build a theme park. Whereas this is exactly where you wouldn't want to build a theme park because it's evil, and I think as a result of that, a lot of people quit the scenario progress before even reaching Mega Park or things like that, right? I think for a lot of people, if they're not using like a Open RCT2 or some other, like if you were playing the original version of the game back then and you wanted a sandbox in RollerCoaster Tycoon and you hadn't played through the career, like Forest Frontiers was your sandbox. I remember there was some like hack for it's like some trainer I had, and if you don't know what a trainer is, a trainer is like something that people used before, it's like a mod basically, but it would cheat and things, and it was sort of something that a lot of games had before, like built-in mods and things. But I remember there was a trainer for RCT Deluxe that would allow you to basically turn whatever, like you could, whatever it was open, you would have your game open, you'd load your map, and then you'd like alt tab out of your game, and you'd load up your trainer, and it would like unlock all land, and you could add whatever rides you wanted. Like you could basically turn any scenario into a full-fledged sandbox. I remember building this massive park in what used to be Forest Frontiers, and yeah, it was really cool. Because you could use all of the expansion rides, and you can do all sorts of things. You could even move the entrance and things like that. It was neat. For the time, of course, you can do all of this stuff now in much more official tool sets, but at the time, there was nothing like it. Much like some of the other scenarios that have huge plots of land to buy, this one has like these random squares that you can't buy. And I really do wonder if that's like, was that always the intention? Like, what was the other one that had that too? And I just have like this square sitting in the middle of, I can't remember which map it is now. But it's happened before. Where there's like these random squares that you can't buy, and I really do wonder if they were just missed. Like were they supposed to be flagged and they just weren't? It's hard to say, because like is that even considered a bug? It's more like just a missed thing, but I do wonder about that. So if you know the answer to that, if you know of whether that's an actual bug or whether it was intentional, that those pieces of land are not purchasable, the ones that just sit in the middle of the park, let me know in the comments. I've always been curious if you have a definitive answer on that. So the next coaster I decided to build was the green and gray one there, and I called that one Molok's Despair. And that's because, it sort of does the big time draw there, you're waiting to go down, there's anticipation, and then it sort of goes down into the ground, comes up, and then does a really fast sweep sort of around the base of Molok there before crawling back up. And I wanted to do more with the coaster, but I just didn't have the momentum, even with a 3-car carriage. So I just sort of do a little swivel thing and go back to the station. Finally building the last food court there. The south side of this park does not have much in the way of food court, so I made up for that fact with just bathrooms and souvenir stalls just to handle the basic needs, and to make sure that the few people that somehow didn't end up with a umbrella and also ended up at the back of the park somehow, because it rains so often that I don't know how they could walk like 5 steps without it raining. Like it's raining right now. It's always raining. I bet you if I went back through this video and recorded like the percentage of rain, it's got to be at least like 60-40 rain to no rain. But anyway, yeah, I just used souvenir stalls and stuff at the back. I didn't put a whole lot for food or anything in this particular scenario. There just isn't a lot of flat areas, and I do find that the sort of food court plazas don't necessarily look all that great, just sort of sitting on their own platform, suspended up in the air or whatever. Now, if this was RCT2 and I could do more with buildings and building at height with the shift key and stuff, that would be a little bit different. But given that it's RCT1, it really is limiting in terms of ways that you can put those types of things indoors. It's pretty much impossible unless you build sort of a faux structure out of ride pieces, which there are some pretty good ones out there that I've seen, structures built out of ride pieces that cover those and things and do a pretty convincing job, but it isn't something that I like to do, particularly in my own scenario plays. I like to keep ride pieces as ride pieces, unless I'm doing some sort of like a roller coaster archway, as I've mentioned in prior scenarios. Here we go, doing the monorail underground now. The second station. I realized after I had built the station and built out the paths that the two stations actually aren't that far apart from each other. They actually connect to like the same main path basically, because the front monorail station, even though the monorail itself is lower, the path itself actually goes up through that sort of slanted building to the top level, and the entrance is at the top level there. And then this monorail station, I was like, oh, cool, I'll put the entrance at the bottom. And then I realized that, but the path that I'm connecting it to, like literally you just turn left, go right up the hill, and you're at the entrance to the other monorail station. But I guess it saved you, the walk up the hill outside. Now you walked up the hill inside. I guess it's like the same. Finally building the other tower there. I really like the end result of this area, as I mentioned before, and I do think having the two towers there sort of side by side looks pretty cool. I do play quite a bit with the colors of rides in this particular playthrough. Like I would set a color and then I'd be looking at it later and be like, I don't like that color. I'll make it a different, sort of variation on the color scheme I had settled with, which was mostly like gray, red, and black. But every so often I threw in some yellow, threw in some green, and threw in some white, just to sort of vary it up a bit and give it a little bit of a more chaotic feel than just everything red and black. It's evil, but it's not that evil. The further you go back into the scenario, of course, I tried to make the trees denser and denser and denser, making it a little bit... I also put a little bit more tree variation down at the front, sort of, to give, like, sort of this progression. And then I went, like, strictly pine trees, sort of, at the back as you went higher up into the mountainous area. Really been cool if I had the spooky theme for this one. That would have been what would have made the Molok theme just that much better. I'm happy I came up with something. Honestly, like I was at the point where I was just like, no, not doing it. Because like honestly, if I can't come up with something that I want to build, I'm not going to build it. You're never going to get sort of uh, me doing content just for content's sake. If I have nothing to show you, there will be nothing new for you to see, right? Um, until I've done something that I want to show. So with this one, I am happy that I came up with something that's sort of like a more cohesive theme than just cabins at lake and forest mountain area. I mean, in the end, that's what it ends up being. But it feels more like it has purpose now, right? That's the way I feel about it anyway. Which, speaking of building things with purpose, I do have more episodes recorded already of the Soviet Republic. That one's a lot easier to do. As I honestly, I didn't think anyone was gonna watch that. I had so much footage of it because I wanted to play the game and I wanted to record it, and so I just started recording it. And then it's like, oh well, now I have all this footage, and I play the game for so much that like it's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of gigabytes of footage, right? And so for me to it was either a choice of like, do I archive that footage, which means like I throw it on some sort of backup external storage, I get it out of my main sort of area because it's using up a lot of space, and then fetch it out later, bring it back, and do something with it, or do I just publish it, right? And I kind of figured, given how much I want to play the game, I'll just publish it, and see what happens. And I was actually surprised at the response on that one. So, yeah, I got more of those coming too. But the main focus will remain on theme parks and building and games that I can do more with. I like doing the outros, and I like constructing things that I can present in a way. And when it comes to workers and resources, I just don't have any other sort of presentation that I feel that I could do that does the game justice, that doesn't end up cutting out 90%. And with that game, I do feel that like you want to see it, right? Like that's how I feel. Is that I don't like jumping in when I was looking at the videos that other content producers were doing. They were either cheating to sort of keep content going, or they were cutting out large parts and then coming in and being like, here's what I did, and blah blah, blah, which is great. I'm not saying that they're bad content makers or anything like that. It's just what I felt that the game needed and was lacking on YouTube was just complete playthroughs, because that's what I wanted to watch. I just wanted to sit there and put it on in the background and watch someone for hours on end play realistic mode and see how they were doing it. And I couldn't find that. There was no one else doing it. There was a few live plays and things like that, but no one that was like really seriously going at it without 10 episodes of the game on pause or something. But anyways, this isn't an episode about workers and resources, but yeah, the main focus will remain on stuff like RollerCoaster Tycoon. Like I said, I do have the Planet Coaster videos coming out some point when I can actually get things going on that particular one. It is a little bit intimidating, given that I feel that I set a pretty good standard for that style of video with my RCT3 Vanilla Hills video. And so that's sort of the bar that I want to meet with those. which is a challenge because I think I did a pretty good job overall on that park, the presentation, the outro. I know personality wise I'm pretty boring, but there's not much I can do about that. It is what it is. But aside from that, it's a video that's what I wanted to make, right? And I want the Planet Coaster ones to be very similar, but better because Planet Coaster is better. The video has to be of the quality of the game. Otherwise, I just don't feel like it's worth it. I don't want to just put out whatever. I do like to put some serious effort into things. So, yeah. So there will be lots more stuff coming. RollerCoaster Tycoon World is coming too, believe it or not. I will be playing that. Actually, I've already started playing it. I do have videos recorded of it, but due to the way the scenario progression and unlocking stuff works in that game, to complete a park, and yes, I'm actually going to try to complete parks in that game and do outros. I don't know if it's going to work. Given that some of the field of view things in that game are like totally like way out of whack, like the way that they simulate speed and stuff by changing the field of view, and oh man, it's crazy. Stuff gets warped all out of. But aside from that, the reason I'm playing it is because I want to get through all of the scenarios, because I've never seen them. And I don't think anyone else has seen them either, given that nobody plays that game. So this roller coaster here, I decided to call Bill in the Bush, which is probably a reference that's way too old for some viewers of this video, but it's Bill Clinton and George Bush both go to Bohemian Grove, so I thought that was an interesting name for it, Bill in the Bush. The other bobsled coaster I named Weaving Spider, which is part of their I don't know what you would call it, scripture, whatever they have in Bohemian Grove, that. Weaving Spider that's basically what they refer to outsiders as. And so I thought that was a pretty good name for the sort of helix-based bobsled coaster weaving through the densest parts of the forest there. I wasn't sure on the 3D cinema, honestly. Like, it seemed a little out of place. But given that I could get it in this central location, ultimately I decided that it could stay. I was debating, like, replacing it with something like a Space Rings or something a little less obtrusive that would maybe fit the overall theming of the area a bit better. But, it's sort of... I like that. The look of it, though, it's so neat with the big. Reminds me of Epcot Center, right? That's the name of it. The big ball in Disney World, the Epcot Center. Yeah, that's what it reminds me of. I don't know if that was what they were aiming for. I mean, I think that's. I was actually in that once, and I barely remember it because I was so young. But it's kind of like a ride, right? If I remember right. Like a slow ride, though. Getting this coaster to the type where the ratings weren't like ridiculously high on the intensity took a little bit of work. I was really, really set on the idea that this coaster would be weaving in and out of the paths and down that hill, going beside the drop coaster, Bill in the bush. I wanted them to kind of go side by side like that there. And yeah, and then I wanted a whole bunch of inversions. And how many inversions did I put into this? One, two, two. It's got 2 loops and 4. Well, I guess 3. Of the quarter inversions, that complete and go back. So I don't know if you'd consider it 3 or 6, but yeah. And then it has that like long dip. Now the only part that I really don't particularly like, and this is where I wish that RCT1 had sort of the draw, the down and curving with a helix, where there's actually a curve on the downward slopes instead of just the sort of the flat turn on the downward slope. As I did try a number of other ways to sort of make that loop connect to the path the track at that level going down the hill, where I could get it to be at exactly that height, but I couldn't really find any other way to make that happen. So it is a little bit jarring. I think you do the loops and then it's like immediately you're accelerating down the hill. And I would have liked if there was a little bit more space there where I could have sort of provided a moment of relief after the loop, and then they go down the hill. But it is what it is. I have the space that I have, and I had to fit something in there. Finally, I figured that I should throw something over here. I decided the motion simulator was probably the most fitting, given that I would have to have something that was sort of like up in the air. I wanted to have sort of like a bridge system. I didn't want to have whatever ride was there sort of down set into the land. So, it was sort of like between the motion simulator and the space rings, and I just don't think that the space rings look very good if they're not sitting flat on, the land. And I don't mean like just having like the land like underneath it. I mean like, where they have some border and stuff around them. I don't think they look good up in the air, even sitting on land. Threw a little go-kart underneath the weaving spider there. That's the weaving spider, the bobsled. I really tried to manage speed on that one, so it gets a little bit, it goes fast for a little bit, and then I use the helixes to bring it up to like a nice slow sort of flat crawl, and then it descends down into another section. Given how little space I had back here, I really wasn't sure what to do with this building that has the monorail, the chairlift, and the weaving spider all combined within it. Of course, the monorail is underground, and like I said, it's not actually part of the building. It's under the building, and you go through those entrance and exit paths that are there at the front. But the other two are sort of stacked on top of each other. Opposite sides, and and given that this building is only 2 squares wide, fitting 2 different entrances with enough space in there was a little bit of a challenge to get something that looked a little bit natural. I felt that the large flat wall on the building just wasn't doing it for me, and so I threw a little another layer there of sort of bevel, I guess you could call it, just for some added detail, and to sort of accent the tunnels underneath heading towards the monorail. On this side, I had the weaving spider actually come out underneath those food court, the bathroom and the souvenir stall there, and once I have the fencing and stuff, I actually like that area quite a bit too. along with that topspin area with the river. There's a lot of areas I really like in this park, actually. Once I got through the slog of actually getting all the land purchased and getting things positioned and getting to the point where I could actually start building and setting things up, it really did start to grow on me. Just the various types of settings and stuff I could do. It was pretty neat. Plus, we got Molok the Owl. You got to have Molok, right? In Bohemian Grove, or Mystic Mountain, or Mothball Mountain. Mystic Mountain's such a better name than Mothball Mountain. I'm not sure why they would have dumped that. A lot of the names differences I don't really understand why it would be different, instead of having the UK stuff. Same with like having some of the rides aren't named properly or at all in the US version of this game, but they are in the UK version. I just don't understand these differences. Like, why? Like, who did the locales on that? It wasn't just like copy all, done. Yeah, so I went and like changed this coaster a bunch of times because I wasn't really happy with the way that it looked, or it had a little bit too much acceleration still, and I needed to throw in like another helix just to slow it down just a little bit more. Again, with this one and the weaving spider, I really felt that speed management mattered. I didn't want them to be going too fast. I wanted them to have like these nice sort of slow parts. Again, going with sort of like the feeling of despair and anxiousness and anticipation that I wanted to create in this park with all of the different rides and stuff and the evilness. And it's just to reflect the evilness of the map. I just feel that this map is... Yeah, there's nothing going for you in this map. There isn't any redeeming qualities. Okay, well, there's one redeeming quality, and that's that you start off with a nice selection of food stuff. So you've got your information kiosk, you've got your drinks, you've got your, something for people to eat, and you got your bathroom. You've got everything you need. You don't have to research that stuff right off the bat, which is really nice. Of course, you get a not great selection of rides, so you're pretty much researching right off the bat anyway, but at least you're not having to waste some of that on the food stalls. Although for I was playing the game, given that I just wanted to unlock anything anyway, I just threw all research on max. I didn't bother prioritizing anything in this one. I was just like, give me everything. Give me everything. And I really didn't start sincerely building up until I had actually unlocked everything, because I wanted to have the maximum selection of rides and stuff for positioning and things like that, as you really do have a limited amount of space. So I wanted to try to maximize the way that I use the space as best as possible. Coming in and doing these rear buildings after having all the coasters and stuff there was somewhat of a challenge. I do recommend doing it this way, though. You'll notice in a lot of my parks, the way that I structure the building is I will actually like put down sort of small pieces of land marks, construct the ride, and then come back later and actually do the theming and infrastructure. As opposed to the other way that I build parks, in that I build all of the infrastructure and the theming first, and then come in and just sort of like sweep across the land, right? It depends. It really depends on the scenery and what I'm trying to accomplish, and the complexity of the layout is a big, factor. Because if I'm trying to do like an extremely complex layout, then sort of templating things out first is a far more feasible approach usually. But again, it's like the more you template and the more you sort of box yourself in, the more you're also sort of stuck in those particular situations, and then you can just end up making a big mess of everything, and nothing looks good, because it's really easy to procrastinate that theming, or it's like, I'll get to that later. I'll get to that later. I don't really need to do that, right? So there is that aspect to it, that you can just start going nuts at templating, and then you filled the park with a whole bunch of tracked rides and everything's everywhere, and now you're like, okay, how do I do this? And there's been a few examples already in the scenarios I've played where I didn't bother doing it. Probably Diamond Heights is the biggest example of that, in the far reaches of the park, where I just didn't want to deal with it. All of the different coaster tunnels and the train and everything, and I just threw some trees and some walls and said, yeah, good enough. I'm not building in this area, as it just was not something I wanted to clean up, so it was just sort of left as is. As I don't think I could make it look any better without some significant surgery, basically. And there would have been no there would have been no point anyway, given that the area was already pretty full with rides, and it's so far from the entrance, given that the entrance isn't centralized in that map. So guests actually were getting lost at that point. So having more rides over there would have been a complete waste of time anyway. Now it was just a matter of finishing up the scenery. Pretty much just did like a big sweep, sectioning things off. The way that I had structured the rides at this point had pretty well sectioned everything off nicely, that made it approachable. So I would do, a little bit in here, a little bit in there, jump over to here, do a little bit in there. I knew that the majority of this area would be just sort of like forest. I didn't want to go too all out on any sort of additional decorations or anything. I really wanted to, sort of make this like cabins in the wilderness type thing. I do like the way that I ended up sitting the bumper cars on top of that section of the roller coaster. So almost all of the bumper cars is supported by like lattices, and except for one like tiny piece of land that's centered underneath of it. And then I sort of put like rock faces all around it, going down into this little lake that's like one of the higher altitude lakes, that I then have the roller coaster helixing around the lake, and then part of the wide angle turn there goes right underneath the bumper cars, which puts an indent in the lattice. And ultimately, I think with the rock and then the path and then the roller coaster there, that's also one of my favorite areas of this particular map. Like I said, I got lots of favorite areas of this map. I think there's lots of really neat sort of views, sights to see in this one. I wasn't super happy with having that giant ramp up to the top there, but I also wasn't sure what else I would want to do, because I didn't want to flatten that hill. Like I didn't want to put out a big platform or anything, and I didn't want to dig into that side of the hill either, and present myself with another problem to solve. So I figured that it's okay having like this sort of large somewhat suspended path that goes down. Like if it had been flat on the ground, I don't think I would have tolerated it. But the fact that I was able to sort of it descends mostly one unit until you get near the bottom there, and then sort of has like this little indent into the ground, and I thought that was neat. So I left it that way instead of sort of fixing the land around it. I thought it was fitting. Yep. At this point, it was really just a matter of getting a bunch of vegetation in, uh, keep trying to be mindful of angles and views and not occluding things. As sometimes if you stack too many trees together, from certain angles, it's going to look weird, or if there isn't enough trees then in certain angles, it looks weird. So the more trees you add, the more you really need to check those angles and make sure that those trees all sort of look like they make sense from each of those angles. This was going to be basically the thickest part of the forest. I pretty much wanted to surround the entire weaving spider with lots and lots and lots of pine trees, and really get that excitement up on it, which I think I did end up getting up over 7.5 or something. But yeah, that was sort of the objective here. Now, getting it looking nice with all of the sort of suspended or supported track there. I did try to make that one lower on the ground. When I was building it, I kind of envisioned that it would have been maybe 3 or 4 units lower. But in the end, that was just sort of the height that it ended at. And I tried to sort of get it to go down and descend down to a lower level quite a bit quicker. But then when I was building it, it just, that was the level that it wanted to sit at. And so I just I went with it. It's a little high on the supports for my taste for a bobsled coaster. But that was kind of a big reason why I threw the go-karts underneath. I never intended originally to have a go-kart or anything there, which is why I hadn't planned for any pathing or anything over there. But then once I had the bobsled coaster and I realized how much space was under there, that trees wasn't going to cut it basically, and I needed something more. So I built the go-karts, and then I threw a supporting building just for background and to provide some, variation in the terrain for the supports and things. And then I think combining the go-karts, a little bit of topiary around the go-karts, and the building there, I think did wonders for the area. I threw like a little tiny pond in there. And then when I combine it with the trees, I think it provides just enough variation that it's not too repetitive. Although, again, I would have really liked to have that coaster sitting lower on the ground. So I could have done a little bit of undergrounds and things with it. That would have been nice. But, again, it is what it is. The starting point for the coaster was too high as well. To get it to, I probably could have done a slightly smaller chain lift, but even then, to get the length that I was going for, it's the perfect length. It's about as big as I wanted it to be. It's just too high. But that's okay. I don't really mind. It's pretty good looking coaster as far as I'm concerned, aside from that. And what more can you really do within this game sometimes? It's just what it is. Sometimes I do wish that he had thrown a little bit more in terms of support variation, so you don't have like a whole bunch of vertical lines basically. But anyway, we're coming up on the end of the video here, so I hope you've enjoyed this build, and here is the end result.
We thank thee for thy adjuration. Begone, dull care. Fire shall have its will of thee. Begone, dull care. And all the winds make merry with thy ducks. Hail, fellowship's eternal flame. Once again, midsummer sets us free.